Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Adam Winder. Everybody knows me. But I just want to make it clear, today I'm speaking on my opinions, not on behalf of SEEDS or my role as chair of the board. This is my opinions. I think it's important for the officers of the organization to distinguish that. We work in such an extraordinary and amazing industry. When we get up every day and get to help and have such a purpose-driven companies in helping people build their family. Working alongside so many amazing people in this room and watching how you respond when things go wrong, when people need us, it showed me over the last 10 years that you all care, that we care. Like when COVID, we showed that this industry cares about people. And that is the strength of the space. Now we need to take that care that we have and that passion that we have and also make sure we translate it into accountability. Because sometimes being nice and being kind or having goodwill is not enough. We need accountability. And the reason that it's important, and the reason today we're here to talk about standards and what SEEDS is doing in accountability is because if we don't do it, if we don't take steps to better protect this industry, somebody else will. And the privilege we have of helping families, build families, I think it's a huge privilege, could be taken away from us. It's happened in other countries and it can happen here. So we as an industry need to ask the right questions, identify risk, challenge each other, and find the best path forward. And unfortunately, I've spent my entire career trying to make escrow popular. It's not a very exciting subject. Checks and balances, bonding, it's quite boring for a lot of people. I think it's quite cool. But escrow is never popular unless there's a problem. And unfortunately, it's been quite popular recently. Too popular. So, and look, fraud can happen in any industry. It really can, and it does. Like, just Google how many times in different spaces that there's fraud, even in highly regulated spaces. I would argue that in our space, when fraud happens, it hits a little harder because they're robbing a family, right? They're robbing somebody's dreams. So it's very, very newsworthy. And it's happened way too much. Let me ask you guys, this is the Wall Street Journal on the recent fraud in our industry in escrow. How many of you read this? If not, show of hands. On the front page, by the way.
Wall Street Journal.
How many of you know what it is or heard of it? How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? Okay. Well, the Wall Street Journal put out an article, and it was on the front page on print, which these still happen, by the way, and digital, look, the article was decisively negative. It told the story of 5 fraud cases and the very personal impact it had on some families, which was terrible. And what it did was it created disgust. And the readers of the Wall Street Journal are government officials, regulators, and a lot of people considering surrogacy. So think about the concerns they have now. But look, what the Wall Street Journal didn't do was it didn't tell the other half of the sentence. It stopped at here's the problem. Well, the other half of the sentence is, well, what's the solution? And how do people select a qualified provider? And what good has happened? It doesn't talk about the thousands of families that this room serves every year and helps build their dream. It just talks about the problems. And let's just take it a step further. So. And look at what this article covered. So in the past 20 years, there's been 9 known cases of fraud, 9 public cases of fraud. Over $20 million have been stolen from people. 20 million. Look, enough is enough. And these cases don't just hurt the families, which is terrible. They also hurt the credibility of our industry as a whole. And they don't write about the good cases, they write about these. And I don't know how many more of these headlines we could really survive. Now, here's the good news within these cases. My favorite to start with is these people are going to jail. 7 of the 9 of them have been sentenced to a combined 19 years, 7 months in jail, which is great news. And the Dominique side, the leader who stole the most of the funds, has yet to be sentenced, and her time will come. So looking at this room and knowing many of you, trust me, you won't do well in jail. So So if you're thinking about stealing or doing wrong, think twice. Maybe, yeah, you wouldn't do well. Let's take a closer look at the fraud. Seriously. What is encouraging to me, if you look at these 9 cases, every single one of them is preventable. Of the 9 cases, 6 of them were agency-held escrow, a prohibited practice, one that's outlawed in a lot of states because the agencies coordinate everybody, brings everybody together, and plays that critical role of managing the overall process. If they're also managing the money and in full control and paying themselves, the risk is just too high. That's why states like California, Illinois, and others ban it, and that's why it's prohibited in the current SEEDS standard. 2 of the escrow providers that stole money were both highly unqualified. Highly unqualified. They didn't have the expertise, the qualifications, bonding, oversight, any of the things in place you would expect of a financial company managing millions of dollars. And the one law firm that's the recent one, IRLG, we don't have all of the details yet, but I would bet the farm that they also would have met the standard. So, and oddly enough, 6 of 9 of them were in California, almost 70%. And I think that's why when you look to the California statute, it bans some of the riskier practices that we all know about. I always say it's only the drunk drivers that complain about sobriety speed checks, right? And you don't read about the drunk drivers and the DUIs. You actually don't. You damn sure don't read about drunk drivers hitting drunk drivers. What you read about is you read about drunk drivers hitting an innocent family, T-boning that innocent family and killing them. And that's actually what we're seeing in our industry. What are they writing about? The family's impacted, right? And if our standards were in place to protect people, all of these could have been avoided. And especially if, as an industry, we hold people accountable and continue to push for better standards. And look, I wish they were in place sooner, but there was never a wrong time to do the right thing. So let's look back at how we got here. Show of hands. How many of you use an iPhone? How many of you use an Android? What is wrong with you? Practically everybody in the room, right? Uses one of those 2 phones. Remember the BlackBerry? Remember that? I remember saying, "We'll take this from you over my dead body," right? And remember before that, the flip phone that fit your face perfectly? Before that, how many of you grew up remembering the phone on the wall? Where you had to literally, if you were lucky, you had a long cord and you could run around the corner and hope nobody was listening when you were talking to your girlfriend or boyfriend. It was very challenging. And much like the evolution of the phone, why am I talking about phones? Much like the evolution of the phone, this industry has evolved, and that evolution has not been covered. Like the progress we made has not been covered. And we must keep pushing forward. You know, so look at the early days of escrow. Escrow was established in this industry because there was a need. People needed money held between parties. It was critical. It was mainly done by law firms, agencies, and title companies who weren't really set up as financial organizations. They didn't have experience in it. They were doing it to serve a need. They didn't have the bonding, insurance, audits, checks and balances, and typical things you'd find in a financial company. Most of them didn't do it for wrong. They just didn't know how. And what that created was an environment where things went wrong. Bad actors took advantage of it. And the industry grew. It was time to take the phone off the wall, plaster it, paint it. You know, it wasn't going back up, and we evolved into a better model of escrow. One that is more secure, one that's better. And what's beautiful is what has happened, and what didn't get covered here, was that has led to a safer model. And one or 2 companies leading the way and making it better actually made everybody do it better, and now people are safer. Huh? I'm really bad at this. I'm gonna help you too. So every like the change over time from going from the early days of the flip phone to the iPhone wasn't easy. People resist change. And when I think of the future of our industry, there's going to be more regulation, right? There's going to be changes coming, right? It's growing, it's getting a lot of attention, and we need to be ready to embrace it. But just like the early days of Seed Trust and escrow, when we came in and said, hey, it should be a fiduciary, it should be bonded and audited. Everything we brought to the market initially to technology, it was too hard, it was too expensive, it wasn't fair, you shouldn't do this. And the audit, it's hard to do. And that was progress, but people fought it because it was change. And just like new standards are gonna feel hard. There's change and we have to embrace it. So I always think about, if we're gonna get better, we have to keep pushing to be better. We have to keep challenging ourselves. And if we want to get better, we have to keep raising the bar. And I don't think if we're managing people's dreams and people's money, and escrow companies have to do a better job with this kind of stuff, is literally going to shut down our industry. So why do standards matter? How many of you flew on a plane here? Many of you. So many, right? When you got on that plane, I bet you really hoped. I think I'm still on the same slide.
All right.
Okay. No, you're right. When you got on the plane, I bet you hoped that pilot was licensed and qualified and trained, right? When you go to a doctor, you want your doctor to graduate medical school. You want your lawyer to be barred in the states that they should practice in. You want the lifeguard at your kid's pool to be an excellent swimmer. You want the bank to be regulated. So why would we not want standards for our industry? Why do we not need standards when it comes to surrogacy? Why do we not need standards when it comes to escrow? That's a trick question. We do. The same model of we need to protect ourselves is important, and we need to protect our clients. And look, sometimes doing the right thing is the hard thing. They're one and the same. And I will tell you, having spoken to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the victims of these frauds, because we took on millions of dollars of work pro bono to help them, was one of the most heartbreaking times of my career speaking to these people. There was nowhere for them to come. They got on a plane with an unlicensed pilot, and they had no idea. So I'm gonna do one last analogy, and I'll stop it. Right? But we've been in business, this industry's been in business effectively helping families for the last 40 years, right? Let's draw a comparison. The automobile industry started 115 years ago when the Model T got mass produced. All of a sudden, there was more cars on the street than horses. The roads got paved. So what did you need? You needed speed limits. And I'm not comparing us, and police to govern them. Look, I'm not comparing our horses, or us to horses, but much like now that we've grown and other industries evolved, we now need speed limits and we need to police ourselves. And if we don't, somebody else will. So I personally think the SEEDS standard is a really huge turning point because it was SEEDS as an organization stepping forward from setting standards for agencies to also extending it to professionals and actually taking action. And it was done by a group of large, small independent escrow operators and attorneys. And what it did was it created a minimum standard that was achievable for new entrants and people who should be trusted to hold escrow, but also high enough to where it truly protected people. And the tenets of it are obvious for a financial standpoint. You had to be qualified, governance, oversight, safeguards, and transparency. So, and I always think when I hear people complaining, and look, I felt so furious when these frauds happened, particularly around one of the biggest and most recent ones, because we were all too nice. They weren't qualified, they shouldn't have been done it, and we should have held them accountable. But if somebody's fighting standards or fighting the bar being risen or us being held accountable or you being held accountable in your business, there's usually only a few reasons. They're either unqualified, they're greedy, they're unwilling, or they're hiding something. All disqualifiers are people you should trust, especially people managing money. So the beauty of the standards too that I think is something that we can replicate at SEEDS is the standards actually creates a foundation for education, which was the core of this organization. Now it's not a company or a few companies saying, hey, here's what should be in place. It's an organization that represents the industry saying, here's what you should look for in an escrow company. Here's what should be in place for you to trust somebody. So now when you're thinking about, is the escrow company qualified? Should they be trusted? Pull out the standard. Do they meet it or do they not? If they're below it, then I would argue the risk is too high. And the good news is that this is a formula that can be replicated more broadly. Standards plus education plus compliance equals accountability equals trust. And we can do this as we expand our standards from agencies to escrow and beyond. So let me leave you with a few thoughts. The fraud, which is personal to me, it kills me because this is our whole purpose to help avoid this. But the fraud exposed weaknesses in our industry and gave us the opportunity to fix them. And we took action, and we must continue to take action to keep advancing this industry. We need to continue to identify vulnerabilities, act decisively, set standards, and hold each other accountable. Again, if we don't do this, I'm truly concerned that we may lose the privilege to keep serving families. These SEEDS standards aren't just a set of rules by SEEDS, it's actually a reflection of our values as an industry and that are serving people. And we can't get rid of the past. We can't fix what was done, but what we can do is we can fix the future. If we do it properly, we can build a foundation of trust and set a foundation going forward for this field to succeed and continue to help people. Thank you.